discovered a few anomalies. One of which was if you had fired a bunch of torpedoes and you blew up the other ship, the timer then to restart the game was less than the torpedo life of the torpedoes that had just been fired. So if you started the next game quickly, the torpedoes from the last game would still be coming through. And I looked at that, and I could have fixed it when I discovered it, but I decided it would be much easier to call it a feature. And I think that the kids at Stanford that were really playing the game, the ones that were really into the game, they liked that feature because it's the kind of thing that gave them an advantage over the people that didn't play so much. And but more recently, I had to go back into the code because I was helping James Markovich, who we'll get to in a little bit, but if we have time. But I had to go back into the code and explain it to him because he was reviving Spacewar on an emulator, and I had to understand the code and explain it to him. And number one, I discovered, my God, when I was back then, I was writing code that I would never, and not documenting, not commenting, but I would never do. I was amazed that I would do that. And also,
so I guess
I hate to tell you this, but the code is so poorly structured that it's embarrassing. But the other thing that I also realized is that I've been involved with putting professional products in the field with real companies, and the amount of testing that goes on now on any product that goes in the field, and you realize, well, number one, I was working as a small company, but I think even more than that. Back in '71, there wasn't the methodology of putting software products in the field, and the whole idea of rigorously testing something before it went. No, I think that IBM must have understood stuff like that, but certainly...
But they didn't produce games.
That's true. But at least in my experience, and the whole, I guess in select companies they were doing strong testing, but in the rest of the industry, I don't think it really was being done yet.
When I was working for Nolan Bushnell, much later, the rule of thumb on computer games was an hour of software. For every hour of software engineering time to make the program, you needed to spend an hour of testing time to get it up to adequate reliability. If you count the time that it sat in the coffee shop getting played, I think you'll find that you got a lot more testing than that rule of thumb.
But we didn't take that testing and put it back into more quality. I do want to jump ahead and talk about James, because I just looked at the clock here and we're down to like 10 minutes or so. So Galaxy Game came out of Tressiter in 79, 80, somewhere in that time frame because of the display process. I went in one day, I tweaked it this way, I twisted it that way, and I was busy doing other things. I said, that's it, and I pulled it out. And it came to my house, and the fiberglass cases sat outside for 20 years under a Monterey pine, dripping pine on them, sat on them. The power supplies were in a metal shed that leaked, and the display and the CPU were just mounted in a rack and weren't powered up or anything, and that went on for 20 years. Then since 99, for some reason I thought it would really be nice to bring it back to life again. And I called up Ted Panofsky and told him I was thinking of doing this and would he be willing to help. And I need a new display processor built using the old design, and of course I'm not going to pay you anything. And he said he'd love to help. So we worked together for 3 or 4 months, and we brought it back and got it running again, and had a nice party at my house and invited everybody over. The power supplies came out, they were all rusty and everything. Instead of trying to form up the capacitors and take care of them and do all of that stuff, I just plugged them in and they worked. And the PDP-11
Kids, don't try that at home.
The
20-year-old power supplies usually blow up.
I know, but I had a spare. So anyway, and basically once the display process of the new one was running, which we used Auget wire wrap boards, much more reliable. And it came up and it started running very quickly. And I eventually, or fairly soon, moved over to the Gates building in Stanford, but it was only accessible to graduate students. It ran there for 3 or 4 years with no service calls. It was very reliable. They were in a mode though where they would just plug it in when they wanted to play it and unplug it, which is actually pretty hard on them. The temperature cycles are what you want to avoid. So, but it wasn't getting much play, so I then moved it over to the Computer History Museum while they were still at Moffitt, and it got some use there. But then when they moved into the new building at Shoreline, it went into their visible storage exhibit area, and it was on static display for 6 years. And I was very unhappy about that because I wanted it to be running. So eventually I pulled it out of there after 6 years, and Ted and I took longer to get it running this time. It took 5 or 6 months. Basically, it was the Hewlett-Packard displays that were all of the trouble this time. They're getting pretty old. But we got it running again, and we moved it over to Google, and I had Google actually help me wrest it away from the Computer History Museum. And it ran at Google for a year, and they had a company-wide tournament, and they printed these shirts for it. And then they renovated Building 44 where it was, and so it went into storage at Google for 6 months or so. And eventually I moved it back to the Computer History Museum. It's running there now.
It's hiding under the stairs.
Yeah, it's under the stairs. It's in a little alcove that's very dark. It's a really nice spot for it. And it runs 24 hours a day. It's powered up all the time. And in the last 6 months, once again, I don't even go over and look at it. No one's called me to say there's a problem.
So get on to the FPGA.
Yes. So when I'm doing the restoration of Galaxy Game 3 years ago, I'm also going to a DEC collector's lunch group once a month, and I'm talking to James Markovich, and I'm telling him that the weak spot are the displays. And so a couple of months later at a lunch, James tells me that he's got this FPGA that he thinks he could build a scan converter. And when I like that, and I say, I think that's a pretty difficult task, but I'm going to humor him and I'm going to be polite, so I say, sure, please. 3 or 4 months later, after making small talk for 10 minutes, I finally asked him, well, how's your project coming? And he said, well, actually it's in the car and I want to show it to you. So he shows it to me, and what he does is after lunch he brings in a flat monitor to display this little tiny Xilinx board, and he powers it up. And now it's a scan converter. It's supposed to plug into where the DACs are and convert it from a XY display to a raster scan display. But, you know, we don't have a computer here. All we've got is the little scan converter. He turns it on, and what I see is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bang, there's Spacewar, my Spacewar. And I kind of, huh? So with the FPGA,